All right, get ready for today's deep dive. We're going deep into the brain and specifically how trauma can really mess with our mental state. And, to guide us on this adventure, we'll be cracking open Dr. Faith Harper's book, Unfuck Your Brain.
Yeah, what I really appreciate about Dr. Harper's work is she doesn't just throw science at you. She makes it relatable, like she's saying, hey, feeling messed up doesn't mean you're broken.
Right, like it's so validating. It totally dismantles that whole just get over it thing and the idea that being sensitive is a weakness. She emphasizes that tough experiences can actually change our brains.
And the coolest thing, Unfuck Your Brain isn't just some theory. It's like a toolkit with actual strategies for reclaiming your mental well-being.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into this fascinating world of trauma. Dr. Harper really challenges that typical idea that trauma only comes from massive life events. She argues that even everyday stuff like disrespect, toxic people, or anything that shakes our sense of safety and security can impact our brains.
It's about noticing those subtle ways our boundaries get crossed, those microaggressions we all face, and how all those seemingly small but significant negative experiences add up.
Yeah, our brains are processing this stuff all the time, even if we don't realize it.
Yeah.
And that leads us to how our brains adapt to deal with these experiences.
Okay, so think of it this way. You have this friend, right? And they're like, I'll fight anyone who messes with you. At first, it might feel good, but it stops you from learning how to handle things yourself.
Like having a bodyguard who's always ready to rumble. You need to learn how to handle those situations on your own. And to do that, it helps to understand how the brain works. Dr. Harper breaks down the key players in trauma responses: the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the brainstem.
So the prefrontal cortex, or PFC, that's the boss of your brain, responsible for thinking clearly, planning, making decisions.
Like the CEO, keeping everything running smoothly.
Exactly. But when trauma hits, the amygdala, which handles emotions and memories, can hijack the PFC. See, the amygdala's job is to keep you safe, so it's always looking for danger. When it senses a threat, it triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response.
It's like our primal instinct screaming, remember that, it hurt. It doesn't care if it's a real threat or just something we perceive as a threat.
Right. And then the brainstem, which controls basic stuff like breathing and heart rate, jumps in, getting you ready for action. The problem is this amygdala hijack can happen even when there's no real danger, leading to anxiety, panic, or even anger when it's not really warranted.
It's like when someone cuts you off in traffic and your heart races even though you're safe in your car, or you suddenly flash back to something from the past and it's like you're right back there feeling all those intense emotions again, like your body thinks the threat is still real.
Precisely. And that brings us to another cool concept from the book, the storytelling brain. Our brains are wired to understand things by turning them into stories. It helps us make sense of the world, process feelings, and see our lives as a continuous thing.
Our brains love a good story, even if it's a scary one. This explains why we often replay those traumatic memories. We're trying to understand them, fit them into our understanding of ourselves and the world.
Right, and it's important to remember this storytelling thing is natural and healthy. But with trauma, those stories can get distorted, filled with self-blame or shame.
So what's the takeaway from all this? First, it means you're not crazy. Your reactions are normal biological responses to tough experiences. Your brain's trying to protect you, even if it doesn't always feel that way.
Yeah, the key is recognizing these responses for what they are, survival mechanisms that might not be so helpful anymore.
That's where the unfucking your brain part comes in. Dr. Harper gives us tools to regain control and rewire those automatic responses. But before we dive into that, let's acknowledge something really important. You're a survivor. You've made it through whatever challenges you've faced. You have strength and resilience inside you, even if it doesn't always feel like it.
That's a powerful message for anyone dealing with the effects of trauma. Reminds us that healing is possible. We can reclaim our lives.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about cleaning the wound, not just covering it up. Dr. Harper uses this analogy to show that healing from trauma takes more than just pushing down symptoms. We need to understand the root causes and actively work to change those ingrained patterns.
One of the first steps is understanding how emotions work. We often feel like they control us, but they actually have a really short lifespan. Dr. Harper points out that an emotion, in its purest form, only lasts about 90 seconds.
Wait, really? Just 90 seconds? My anxiety can last for hours, sometimes even days.
That's because we keep those emotions alive by feeding them with our thoughts. We dwell on the situation, replay it over and over, which keeps those stress hormones pumping.
Like hitting replay on a song that makes you sad. You're just making it last longer. So how do we stop doing that?
By learning to recognize that 90-second lifespan and developing ways to manage those intense feelings before they turn into long-lasting moods.
So instead of letting anxiety spiral out of control, we need tools to ground ourselves, to quiet those alarms in our brains.
Exactly. And that's where grounding techniques come in. They're designed to help you feel in control during moments of anxiety or panic. They can be mental, physical, or soothing.
And the book's got tons of options. You can try repeating a powerful mantra, focusing on what you can see, hear, smell, touch, and taste around you, or even doing something physical like jumping jacks.
These techniques work by interrupting the amygdala's hijack and bringing your attention back to the present moment. You're basically retraining your brain to react differently to perceived threats.
It's like telling your amygdala, chill out. There's no saber-toothed tiger chasing us. We're good.
And speaking of retraining the brain, one of the most powerful tools for managing trauma responses is mindfulness meditation.
I know. Might be thinking, meditation, that's a little too woo-woo for me. But trust me, it's not about chanting Om on a mountaintop. It's just about training your mind to focus on the present moment without judging.
There's actually a lot of research that shows mindfulness meditation can reduce stress, anxiety, and even chronic pain.
It's like hitting the pause button on that constant stream of thoughts in your head. Gives your brain a much-needed break.
And the best part is you don't need any special equipment or years of training. You can start with just a few minutes a day, focusing on your breath, how your body feels, or even the sounds around you.
The book acknowledges that meditation can be tough, especially at first. Our minds wander, which is totally normal.
The key is to notice those distractions without judging yourself and gently bring your attention back to whatever you're focusing on.
Like training a puppy. It takes time, patience, and lots of gentle redirection.
What's amazing about mindfulness meditation is that it directly counteracts the brain's storytelling mode. It breaks up those repetitive thoughts that fuel anxiety and depression and calms the amygdala down.
Like turning down the volume on that inner critic who's always whispering doubts and fears.
And on a chemical level, meditation actually increases dopamine and serotonin in the brain. Those are neurotransmitters that make you feel good.
So you're not just calming your mind, you're boosting your brain chemistry. Win-win. Now, while meditation is powerful, it's not the only way to heal. Dr. Harper believes in a holistic approach, incorporating different therapies to support your recovery.
She talks about acupuncture, massage, chiropractic treatment, energy healing, biofeedback, and even changing your diet as part of a total wellness plan.
It's like creating a personalized mix of healing practices that address your unique needs and preferences.
And while Dr. Harper encourages trying these alternative therapies, she's also big on choosing qualified practitioners and using high-quality supplements. Not all woo-woo is good woo-woo.
Right. It's about finding what works for you, but making smart choices along the way. One of the deepest parts of Dr. Harper's approach is finding meaning in chaos. She guides us to see our experiences in a new light by asking powerful questions like, what have you learned about your ability to survive and heal?
It's about realizing that even the toughest experiences can teach us about resilience, strength, and our own inner resources.
Like turning those painful memories into sources of wisdom and growth.
And this reframing often involves building healthy relationships with clear boundaries. Dr. Harper encourages us to figure out who supports our growth and well-being and to set firm limits with people who drain us or keep us stuck in bad patterns.
It's about surrounding yourself with people who lift you up instead of dragging you down. Now, I know we've covered a lot, but remember, healing's a journey. It's not a destination.
There will be ups and downs, setbacks, and breakthroughs.
And that's Celebrate the small wins. And remember, you're not alone in this.
Dr. Harper lists a ton of resources in the book, like recommended reading websites and organizations that can offer more guidance and support.
So don't hesitate to reach out for help when you need it. Asking for support shows strength, not weakness.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on, let's recap what we've talked about so far.
Great idea. Let's summarize what we've learned about trauma and the brain.
So first, we challenged the typical idea of trauma, realizing that it's not just huge events, but also everyday disrespect and boundary violations.
Then we explored how the brain adapts to trauma. But these strategies can backfire over time.
We looked at how the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the brainstem work together to create those fight, flight, or freeze responses.
We also talked about the storytelling brain and how it can make us replay traumatic memories.
We emphasized that you're not crazy. Your reactions are normal biological responses to difficult experiences.
Then we moved on to practical techniques for rewiring the brain, like grounding exercises and mindfulness meditation.
We explored different therapies that can help you heal, emphasizing a holistic approach.
And lastly, we touched on finding meaning in chaos and building healthy relationships with safe boundaries.
That's a lot to take in, but I hope it's giving you a better understanding of how trauma affects the brain and, more importantly, how to start taking control of your own healing journey.
Absolutely. So welcome back to our deep dive into Unfuck Your Brain. In this part, we're going to see how Dr. Harper's trauma-informed lens helps us understand common mental health struggles like anxiety, anger, addiction, and depression. And she offers a new way of looking at these conditions.
It's amazing how she connects these issues back to our brain's survival instincts. It helps us see them not as flaws, but as understandable reactions to difficult experiences.
Let's start with anxiety. Dr. Harper paints this picture of the anxious brain. It's always on high alert, scanning for danger, and ready to activate that fight or flight response in a split second.
It's like having a super cautious security guard who thinks there's danger everywhere. That's the anxious brain.
And this constant vigilance comes from the amygdala's better safe than sorry approach. It's always looking for threats, even when there aren't any.
Right. That's when you get those classic anxiety symptoms: racing heart, sweaty palms, shortness of breath, and that feeling like something terrible is about to happen.
Dr. Harper does a great job of breaking down the physical, emotional, and cognitive symptoms of anxiety. It helps us see them not just as separate discomforts, but as interconnected parts of a bigger pattern.
And she makes a distinction between everyday anxiety, which is a natural response to stress, and clinical anxiety, which really messes with your daily life.
She also points out that anxiety often hides other emotions, especially anger.
Which raises the question, why do we bottle up anger so often, expressing it as anxiety instead of just feeling it directly?
I think it's partly because of how we're raised. We're often taught that showing anger, especially for women, is not okay.
Yeah, there's a real stigma around anger, especially for women.
So instead of acknowledging and expressing our anger in a healthy way, we suppress it. And that can lead to those familiar anxiety symptoms.
Dr. Harper challenges that norm. She wants us to reclaim our anger, understand where it comes from, and find healthy ways to express it.
She gives this helpful way to understand anger using the acronym AEEN. Anger is triggered by hurt, expectations not met, and needs not met.
It's simple but powerful. Helps us pinpoint what's really triggering our anger so we can address it better.
It's about figuring out the message behind the emotion instead of just trying to make it go away.
Once we get the message, we can figure out how to respond constructively instead of letting anger control us.
Now let's switch gears to addiction. Another area where Dr. Harper's trauma-informed approach is really insightful.
She reframes addiction, not as a moral failing or a lack of willpower, but as a way of coping with pain, trauma, or unmet needs.
It's realizing that people often turn to substances or behaviors to numb those painful feelings or to fill a void.
And while those substances or behaviors might provide temporary relief, they don't deal with the root of the problem, often creating a harmful cycle of dependence.
Dr. Harper challenges the traditional just say no approach to addiction treatment. She pushes for a more compassionate and personalized approach.
She emphasizes harm reduction strategies, acknowledging that recovery is a process, not a flip of a switch.
She also encourages us to figure out the root causes of addiction, which often lie in unhealed trauma, past hurts, or unmet needs.
By dealing with those underlying issues, we can start to heal and develop healthier coping mechanisms that don't rely on substances or harmful behaviors.
Now, let's talk about depression. Dr. Harper describes depression as a state of learned helplessness, where your brain basically gives up believing that nothing you do matters.
It's that feeling of being stuck in a deep hole with no way out.
One of the worst symptoms of depression is anhedonia. That's the inability to enjoy things that used to make you happy.
It's like all the color and joy have been drained from life. Everything feels bleak and meaningless.
Dr. Harper gives a really thorough overview of depression symptoms, emphasizing that it's not just about feeling sad. It can manifest as fatigue, low energy, changes in sleep or appetite, trouble concentrating, and even physical pain.
She also debunks the myth that depression is just a chemical imbalance in the brain. While neurochemicals definitely play a role, depression is a complex condition influenced by many things, including genetics, life experiences, trauma, and social support.
That highlights the need for a multifaceted approach to treatment, combining therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, and social support.
Dr. Harper stresses the importance of self-compassion. Realizing that depression isn't a character flaw, it's a treatable condition.
It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend going through the same thing.
One of the most insightful points in this section is the connection between depression and unresolved grief.
Dr. Harper points out that our culture doesn't really give us space to grieve authentically.
We're expected to move on quickly after a loss without truly processing those painful feelings.
And that suppressed grief can show up as depression, anxiety, or other mental health issues.
Dr. Harper encourages us to honor our grief, to let ourselves feel those difficult emotions, and to seek support when we need it.
She also gives practical advice on how to support grieving friends, emphasizing empathy, active listening, and offering tangible help.
One of the most empowering things about Dr. Harper's approach is the idea that we can rewire our brains.
It's a message of hope for anyone who feels trapped by their thoughts, emotions, or behaviors.
She gives a bunch of techniques to help us challenge negative thinking, manage our emotions, and develop healthier coping strategies.
And these techniques aren't just for people who've experienced trauma. They can help anyone who wants to improve their mental well-being, build resilience, and live a more fulfilling life.
Now, get ready to explore the last part of the book. We're diving into Dr. Harper's suggestions for professional help and complementary therapies that can support your healing.
We'll be back soon with part 3 of this deep dive. All right, welcome back to our final deep dive into Unfuck Your Brain. We're shifting gears now from understanding how trauma impacts us to exploring all the different ways we can heal.
Yeah, what's really refreshing about Dr. Harper's approach is that she goes beyond traditional talk therapy and embraces a whole range of healing modalities.
It's recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all solution for mental health and finding what works for you as an individual.
So let's start with the basics, traditional talk therapy. Dr. Harper acknowledges its importance, especially when you have a skilled and compassionate therapist.
It's about having that safe space to work through your experiences, gain insights, and learn coping strategies with the guidance of a trained professional.
But she also acknowledges that talk therapy might not be enough, especially when dealing with the complexities of trauma.
And that's where things get really interesting. Dr. Harper dives into this fascinating world of complementary therapies and how they can support and enhance the healing process.
We're talking about things like acupuncture massage, chiropractic care, energy work, biofeedback. It's like discovering this treasure chest of ancient wisdom and modern science, all aimed at helping us regulate our nervous systems, reduce stress, and reclaim our well-being.
One of the most interesting things about Dr. Harper's approach is how she connects physical and mental health. She explores naturopathic medicine and how things like nutrition, herbal supplements, and lifestyle changes can contribute to mental well-being.
It's about recognizing that our bodies and minds are interconnected. Nourishing one benefits the other.
She also encourages us to be smart consumers. Choose high-quality supplements and consult with qualified practitioners.
It's about doing your research, asking questions, and finding approaches that align with your individual needs and values.
While it's exciting to explore these alternative therapies, Dr. Harper stresses seeking professional help when needed, especially when facing serious mental health challenges.
She gives tips on finding a therapist who's right for you, encourages looking for someone with trauma-informed training and a compassionate approach.
She also believes in incorporating allopathic medicine, which is conventional medical treatments like medication, into a holistic plan.
It's acknowledging that medication can be a useful tool for managing symptoms, especially in the short term, while we work on those deeper underlying issues.
And she's a big advocate for open communication with healthcare providers. Speak up for your needs and work together as a team.
Beyond professional help, Dr. Harper highlights the power of peer support. Connecting with others who've had similar experiences can be incredibly healing.
It's about finding that sense of community, knowing you're not alone in your struggles.
Sometimes the most powerful healing comes from those who've walked a similar path and truly get what you're going through.
She also reminds us to nurture our existing support systems, family, friends, loved ones, those who offer unconditional love and acceptance.
It's allowing ourselves to receive support, realizing it's a sign of strength, not weakness.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Unfuck Your Brain, let's go over the key takeaways. First, healing is possible, even from the most challenging experiences. Our brains are amazingly adaptable, and we can rewire those ingrained patterns that might be holding us back. Second, embrace a holistic approach to healing. Explore different treatment options and find what resonates with you personally. And finally, remember, you're not alone. There are resources available, people who care, and a community waiting to support you. We encourage you to check out Dr. Harper's book for a deeper understanding of these topics and to reach out to the resources she recommends for further guidance and support.
We hope this deep dive has left you feeling empowered, hopeful, and with a fresh perspective on your own healing journey.
Thanks for joining us. Unfucking your brain is an ongoing process, not a destination. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and keep exploring that amazing world within.